A very quick intro. Hi, everyone. Welcome to our workshop called How to Price AI. Thank you so much for joining on a Monday morning. I'm not going to spend too much time, but just wanted to quickly intro Pete Giordano, who you already know. He's one of our most active advisors in our network, and he's a real expert in go-to-market and product positioning. He's our go-to-market. He's our go-to advisor on that topic. And we also have Everett Berry with us today. They will be co-hosting this workshop. So very quickly about Everett, he's the head of go-to-market engineering at Clay, where he pioneers the intersection of technical expertise and sales execution. In this workshop, Pete and Everett will be discussing the effective pricing strategies for AI products. And without further ado, Pete and Everett, I would love to turn it over to you.
All right. That's great, Ekin. Thank you. And Everett, thanks for joining. Everett, I thought before we got into it, maybe you could give a little bit more info about your role at Clay and talk about Clay. And then I'm going to go to the next slide because I think we're going to give people a little bit of an overview of the product. But Everett, take it away. And thank you for being here with us today.
Yeah, of course. Great to be with you again, Pete, and hi Berkeley crew. So Everett Berry, I lead the go-to-market engineering organization at Clay. Go-to-market engineering is the set of people that basically treat go-to-market like a product. So they work on the data, the AI, the systems, and so forth that power a lot of modern go-to-market stacks. And Clay is a go-to-market engineering tool. And so we are probably the leading AI GTM platform in the moment right now with customers like Google, Okta, Figma, some kind of notable names. And Clay essentially combines a couple of different kind of more technical tasks around data acquisition and automation that I'll show you guys in the product in just a moment. So I lead the group of folks there that sort of work with customers to implement Clay. And this is a really common model for AI companies. We're effectively forward deployed engineers. And so a lot of us are more technical, a little bit more knowledgeable on the system side. And so for myself, before I joined Clay, I was a Clay user and customer for 2 years. And then before that, I was actually a software engineer. So it's kind of an interesting role. It is our customer-facing sales team, but most of what we do is give customers advice on go-to-market and help them build out these more complex, more automated flows, most of which involve a fair amount of AI.
Awesome. Do you want to
Yeah,
kick
you
into
bet. So would love to show you guys a little bit
yeah.
about Clay and kind of like what it does. And especially if maybe you haven't seen a lot of go-to-market sort of like tech or problems before, I think it'll be kind of interesting to look at some of the things that customers deal with. Um, so basically, Clay is a system that allows you to pull in data from a variety of different places. You can pull it in from your own data warehouse, from your CRM. You can pull it in from Clay's databases. You can pull it in from kind of intent and signals data sources. You can combine all that data together and enrich it inside Clay's sort of go-to-market environment, effectively as a spreadsheet with a bunch of bells and whistles. And then you can then sync that data out into various destinations. So most of our customers will pull data in from their CRM, enrich it in Clay, and send it back to their CRM. You can also create messaging and send that to sequencers. You can do things like DM people on various social media platforms. You can also use Clay for kind of like data science purposes. So I could show you guys a bunch of kind of like business problem slides and so forth, but I usually prefer to just demo the tool. And so I'll kind of get in here and show you a little bit about how it works. So this is Clay. As you can see, it starts off as a bit of a blank spreadsheet, and then you go through and you populate it with data and information. So most people are going to import records from their CRMs. However, if you've ever used a tool like Sales Navigator or some of the kind of like list building tools out there, you can also do things like that in Clay. We have a database of about 900 million people, 60 million companies you can search through. We also have various signals you can use. So if you wanted to monitor for target customers moving from one account to another, you could do that. We have customers like Rippling and Remote that monitor sort of HR leaders, and if they join a new company, they get in touch with them, things like that. You can also kind of do these more niche list building things in Clay. So, for example, if I wanted to find all of the customers that use a particular technology, I could kind of go in here and I could find Datadog customers, and I could kind of build lists with them using some of the information in Clay. What's cool in Clay is that all of the data is available to be purchased through us. And so really we are a data marketplace for go-to-market data. So all these green coins that you see in the product, this is how much it costs in quote unquote Clay credits to purchase data from these different data providers. And so we spend a lot of time actually on the ecosystem of providers that power the data inside Clay. So let's assume you've imported some information in. Again, this could be something from your CRM. A lot of people will use Clay for like job searches. You can upload CSVs, but regardless, you've gotten your data in some ways. And now you're going to enrich it. And so this is where you're going to get access to the sort of breadth of data providers that are available in Clay. And so within go-to-market, it's very common, for example, for people to want to, um, figure out how many employees work at their target customers. And so you can do that in Clay, and you can actually search through like, 8 different data providers in order to figure out how many employees are at that company. For now, I'm just going to run a basic waterfall just to show you guys some of the functionality of the tool. So I'm just going to convert these company names into domains. Um, and so you can see here, I've got 4 different data providers that I'm going to use for this. My guess is this will just hit the first one. And so we'll just kind of use Clearbit here in order to figure out, so figure out our 2 domains here. And then from there, I can use the output of this enrichment as an input to my next enrichment. And this is how I build sort of these like more complex data pipelines that many of our sort of larger customers will use in order to figure out different things about the organization. And so, yeah, I'll just grab their employee count and I'll grab their industry. And then from here, I could layer on a bunch of different information, right? So I could grab revenue data. So you can see I've got a bunch of providers for revenue data. I could grab fundraising information, so on and so forth. So you can kind of put together lots of different information inside Clay and begin to build this more fully enriched set of information about a company. This is kind of like one side of Clay. The other thing is maybe there's some data points that I want to get together um, that are not available in any particular database. And so for that, you can use our agents. And so I'm just going to create a little prompt here. I'm just going to say research what mental health benefits um, are available to employees at domain. So you can see here, I can kind of pull in information from my enrichments into the prompt. And then I'm just going to generate a prompt here. And so what's happening is Clay is going to take this kind of 1 sentence task that I gave it and go through and generate this like much longer prompt that's going to go out and sort of research information about these companies. So I'm just going to go ahead and run that. And now I can use an agent to then basically perform the research work that a seller or someone might have done normally. And so people use this for all sorts of creative things. My current favorite data point with Clay is hospital bed counter. So we have a health tech company that uh, pulled every hospital in the U.S., counted the number of beds in those hospitals, and that was useful for their go-to-market. And so you can do all of these really creative things with AI and Clay, combine that with the data that you can get from the 100 or so other providers, and build this just super precise targeted profile of companies and contacts that you want to go after. And so for sales teams and marketing teams, demand gen teams, you can use this information to kind of like um, really improve conversion rates, the number of companies you can go after, you can automate things and so forth. So just to show you an example of this, you can see here that we found some pretty specific information. So Stripe offers up to 20 therapy sessions and various mental health programs. And then you can see that what the agent is doing is it's not only going to Stripe's page and researching it, but then it's actually cross-referencing that information with information that it found at other sites that talk about kind of employee benefits. So So yeah, that's kind of Clay in a nutshell. You can build out much more advanced workflows in this, but it's in general, it's a playground that allows you to create these highly customized enrichment pipelines and then automate various tasks within go-to-market. And we've got kind of an interesting pricing model for all this, which I'll turn it back over to Pete to get into.
Hey, Everett, that was phenomenal. And I will say this, we've talked about early customer profiles, ideal customer profiles, positioning. You can see how a tool like this can really superpower so much of your research and, quite frankly, even some of the vetting you may want to do to sharpen your hypothesis and get some information even before you reach out and talk to customers, let alone go find some of them. So anyway, I'm really impressed with the product. And Everett, thanks for that. But now we're going to talk about how do you actually price so many of the AI inner workings that are happening inside of a tool like Clay. And I also want to say this is a session that Everett and I both delivered at Scale Venture Partners Go-to-Market Summit back in April. So you're seeing the content that we delivered to Series A and B companies from the portfolio, and also some pre-seed and seed companies as well. So I just want to, again, just say, really, it's an honor to be able to do this with you all at Skydeck and also just share some of this content. In that light, one of the things I mentioned when we were doing this presentation is that, like, when I was finishing my run at Google back in 2023, AI products were absolutely flourishing. And I spoke with hundreds of folks like you, founders, companies, all about their AI products. And I was hearing all these different ideas about pricing. And one of the consistent things is that everyone was absolutely, and still is, rapidly iterating on pricing. And I've seen Series A companies, Series B companies, even beyond, that have tried 3, 4 pricing models in as many quarters or even months. And the key is no one has anything definitive yet. And it's also somewhat confusing. And we're all still trying to figure out sort of the right model. And so over the past year that I've been at Scale Venture Partners, I totally locked in and became a student of AI pricing. I went through all the models, I read all the analysis, looked at all the posts, and I keep doing it because there's new stuff every single day. And I realized something that was very, super surprising. There are really like 3 core models. And we're going to talk a little bit more about these today. Everything else that comes into your pricing and pricing strategy is simply about how you describe it and sell it to customers. And it was that insight that I had, that it was like these 3 core things that frankly just changed everything about how I advise companies. And in fact, if you go back in SkyHub, you'll probably find some of the other talks I've done on pricing. And so this really kind of supplants that. I think it's a easier to understand and more straightforward framework. And so that's why we're here today, right? Is to make thinking about pricing, thinking about monetization easier for you, so you can just make real progress on this. And like we talked about in other workshops, pricing is essential. Pricing strategy is product strategy. And so I'm trying to arm you with some knowledge, and Everett with some actual kind of real life experience and practical things that are being executed at a company that is scaling, right? And to do that, we're going to share 3 golden rules that we think makes the difference between this AI pricing that scales versus pricing that fails. So first, if you think about traditional SaaS pricing, it was all about giving tools to users so that they could deliver the results, right? But the outcomes depended on the user's experience, expertise, their effort. But AI is fundamentally different, right? The core value of AI is delivering the result. And in that way, AI can automate complex processes, do the work. All of this leads directly to quantifiable business value. And this is why, in a world of AI, in an era of AI, we need to think of a completely different approach to pricing, right? This is a place where instead of customers that pay for access to a product, they're actually going to pay for the value and the results. And so with that, there's a few things that come to mind, right? If we dig in a little bit more, we look at what AI brings that other traditional SaaS just simply can't do. So first, it works 24/7 without human intervention, right? It just works completely autonomously and continuously. It also has an ability to show the customer the value that it's creating through very clear and measurable outputs and outcomes. And third, and this is one of the most important things, it becomes more valuable over time. It continuously gets better. Now, something that completely knocked me sideways is that if you start to look at traditional SaaS and the cost structures, right? In traditional SaaS, when you build the product, every single new user costs a little bit like less money, right? The marginal cost almost goes to zero. But that's very, very different when it comes into AI, right? The game changes absolutely completely. Every single interaction, every question, every generation, right? It all incurs real compute costs, and those costs can multiply. In traditional SaaS, your power users were your best users. In AI SaaS businesses, if you're not looking at it carefully, those power users can really just undermine a lot of your economics in your business model, right? And so this is a fundamental tension in your pricing approach that we're going to address today. And the key tension is, how do you capture all this value that your AI provides and protect yourself, but importantly, your customer from cost overruns and not get in the way of value creation? And that's what we're going to talk about today. Okay. Oh, they're my points coming up on the slide. All right. So three rules that really help us get this framework together. All right. And this is something I've cobbled together now over, I'd say, the last 8 or 9 months as I've been investigating this pretty deeply, working across our portfolio, probably with 30 or so companies that are in discussions and thinking about how they price and monetize and deliver value. And the successful ones, both at our portfolio and outside, companies like Clay, are doing something like these three rules to make themselves successful. And so rule number one is, you've got to find out what your customers actually value and measure when they create value using your product. Number two, you have to make sure that the pricing model you create is going to grow your revenue when the customers create more value with your product. So when the customers win more, you need to win more too. And third, you have to implement something called guardrails, right? That are, like we talked about before, going to protect your margins without getting in the way of that value creation. And so, Everett, this is a point, I think we talked about this at our summit. What are some of the rules that you followed at Clay to be successful around pricing? And maybe you could address some of the points specifically around cost and value and usage and overruns and those sorts of things.
Yeah. So I think at Clay, there were two elements that drove a lot of our initial pricing decisions that have been continue to be reflected in our pricing model. So one is like business considerations with how the market does business today and how we can improve on that. So in a prior world, most people would buy ZoomInfo. They would buy like an annual or a 3-year agreement with ZoomInfo. They would acquire like a bunch of data. They would pay like 80 grand a year for it and sort of like use it from there. What we knew though was that oftentimes customers were not using as much of the contract as they felt like they should be. And in addition, it's in go-to-market, it's very hard to know initially what is going to work in terms of which channels, which types of customers, what type of data, etc. And so having to commit to an annual or even 3-year agreement for a kind of a fixed set of data was problematic for for many companies just kind of writ large. Now, on top of that, what I think the Clay founders did a really nice job of is they took that general problem and then they found the set of customers that were most impacted by this and would be most amenable to a new type of model. And so that set of customers turned out to be basically cold email agencies. And so these are agencies which will execute go-to-market campaigns on behalf of a customer. And so you would pay them, like basically you would have them on a services agreement and you would pay them to go kind of get meetings for your sales team. And so in that model, what that means is that the cold email agency has to have an extremely tight experimentation loop where they get to try a lot of things with a lot of different data, a lot of different tools. And then when they land on something that works well, they can then scale that up. But they generally don't want to kind of commit to anything beforehand. And so Clay's model addresses these things. It allows you to buy the data on a consumption basis. So it allows you to kind of buy a set of general purpose credits that you can use for any type of data within Clay. And then it further allows you to, once you find a go-to-market campaign that's working, scale your usage of the data and scale the number of leads that you're contacting and so forth by just buying more Clay credits. And so this is a big contrast from the traditional setup in this market, which was to kind of commit beforehand to a more limited set of data before you really knew what was going to work. Now, over time, Clay's core customers were kind of cold email agencies 3 years ago. Over time, the people that felt that problem, like they still felt it, but less intensely, then started becoming Clay's customers. And then this flywheel occurred where as we had more users join the platform, whether they were large or small, they were consuming more credits, which allowed us to drive lower prices and buy data in like greater volumes from our data providers, and then pass those savings on to people that were coming onto Clay's platform, which eventually resulted in us getting, having a super competitive offering for even like very large customers that were used to probably buying data in kind of bulk commitment amounts. And so that story addresses sort of the first two areas here, which was to find the value, e.g., a faster go-to-market experimentation platform, and then find a model which worked to that. Now, for the guardrails section, when you are scaling your go-to-market, it often means that you need to scale and have different systems over time. So for a lot of folks starting out, they might do their entire CRM in a spreadsheet, but over time they're going to need to adopt maybe Airtable and then maybe HubSpot and then Salesforce and you know maybe the Dynamics at the very top end, right? So you have to kind of adopt these different types of systems, and then as you scale your different number of contacts that you're looking for in the size of your market, you need to be able to kind of like enrich data at higher volumes. And so from the guardrails side, the way we do it at Clay is we put in feature gates around what types of CRMs and data warehouses you can access at various tiers. And then we furthermore put in gates around just how many contacts you can load into the tool at any one time. So users, as they scale their go-to-market, they will then need to scale they will then need to scale the kind of like systems that support them, and our pricing model aligns with that while making sure that someone at the lowest tier of Clay's model can't just like load in like 50,000 contacts at once and go crazy.
Awesome. That's great. I wanted to make a mention here for everybody. If, please go ahead and add your questions into the meeting chat. We can take a couple points to address those. Okay. Thanks, Everett. Okay, so from there, let's take a look at these 3 golden rules. And this is rule 1. It is literally the cornerstone of everything else we're going to talk about today. If we don't get this right, nothing else really matters. And the key question is, how does your customer use your product to create value in their business, right? Specifically the AI, right? And this isn't like, we talked about this in our ECP workshop, in our positioning workshop, even our customer value. I think we talked a little bit when I mentioned that. This is not what you think it is, right? It's not how the engineers designed it to be, or how you as a founder designed it to be, but this is actually how the customer is going to use it. And you need to understand, like, what are they measuring? Is it time saved? Is it improved customer satisfaction, higher conversion rates? This is the kind of thing that winds up showing up in their dashboards, in the way they manage their own business, right? Like KPIs. So as we discussed in some of the earlier workshops, this isn't about picking something that's convenient. It's about digging deep with customers to understand how they measure the value and making sure that you can build a product that matches how that value is created. Okay, so with that in mind, right, I want to give you a few discovery questions that you can use to actually zero in on a value metric, right? How your customers create value. So number one is, what are the painful problems that the AI is actually solving, right? This isn't your feature list. This is about the benefits your features create that then create the quantifiable business or customer value. Second, it's, how do they customers know when your solution is actually working, right? What shows up in their reports that they are managing for their own team, for their boss, for their manager, all the way up the chain? And third, what naturally increases, right? As the customer extracts more value using your product, what thing increases? This is often something that can be counted or measured, and it correlates directly with the customer success, right? This is where all the magic happens. Like, if you can get zeroed in on this, asking questions like these open-ended questions, you're going to start to understand the root of how pricing can be zeroed in on. Okay, David, I see we have a question from you. Maybe use Clay as a case study example as you describe the rules. Yeah, we can do that, David. I think Everett is hitting on a couple of those points, and we're about to talk about Clay in this regard as well. So as we mentioned, Everett is like living this. And Everett, I'd love for you to share a little bit about the value metric, right? How did Clay zero in on this?
Yeah, so the core value of Clay is to be able to kind of find and build a set of unique data points and automated flows, go-to-market flows that help you kind of win in the market, right? That help you grow your business. And so our pricing kind of leans into the experimentation nature of go-to-market. And so if you talk to most marketers or demand gen teams, they will be talking about, all the different experiments that they're running at one time. And so for Clay, we want them to be able to kind of play around with the tool and run those experiments. And then when they find something that works, we want them to be able to scale it and kind of we want our pricing to scale with that. And so um, what happens here is basically we say, okay, on the free version, you can pull in 100 people at a time. You can kind of write some emails. You can enrich them. But typical go-to-market campaign conversion rates, if you pull in like 100 people, you might get one person that replies, right? And so it's not really enough to run a business on. It's just enough to kind of help you experiment and get going with the tool. Then, as you move up in credit amounts, you also move up in sort of functionality within Clay that allows you to prospect at higher and higher volumes. And so that's how we kind of bake in both the ability to scale usage, e.g., scale credits, but also the ability to kind of align the feature set of the product with customers when they're reaching, larger and larger scales and having more success with their go-to-market. Oh, sorry, Pete, I think you're muted.
Every time. Yeah, thank you, Everett. And I was just wondering, we can take a very quick pause here. This is sort of the format of this. We'll show each rule, and then we'll talk about it from a architecture perspective, and then a Clay implementation perspective. Are there any questions at this point? Okay. All right, let's keep moving then. Awesome. Okay, so this is rule number 2. And this one focuses on choosing a model that is going to ensure that, like we mentioned, that you can grow your revenue as the customers create more value with your product in their business, right? So as those customers win, you should be winning, you should be earning more value, right? I know this seems obvious, but it's where many companies start to stumble, and they will go and pick a model that might seem familiar, or maybe it like a flat subscription or SaaS, or even something about how their product is implemented for the user, instead of looking at something that actually aligns with how the customer is creating the value. Or they might even choose something because they saw what other companies were using in the market. And the key that we want to look at is we have to, again, go and talk to customers and understand what pricing model might be the best fit by understanding how customers respond to a few questions. And so one of the things you can do is first just ask your customer, how do they experience and measure the value, right? Is it primarily through the people in their company using the tools better? Is it through some sort of activity and volume around that? Or is it through a specific business outcome? The next question you can ask is, how predictable is the customer's usage pattern, right? Is it wildly unpredictable? Then you're going to need, specific guardrails. If it has maybe it has more of a seasonal pattern, right? Or maybe it's kind of on a more frequent rhythm of the business pattern on a weekly or monthly basis. And then third, how steeply, this is really important, right? This goes to the guardrails piece. How steeply do the costs increase as customer usage increases? So some AI applications have marginal AI costs, right? While others, depending on the type of work, might have significant impact on cost, right? So these are the top 3 questions. Of course, there's more to explore, but if you start here, you'll begin to get at the root of how your customers are measuring this value, how costs increase, how predictable it is, and you'll be able to start landing on a model. So when we talk about kind of this, these 3 different kinds of pricing models that I mentioned at the very early part of the session, when I said basically there's 3 core models and everything else is how you sell it or describe it and sell it. I think one of the most common models is this idea of a hybrid pricing model, right? Which gives you a little bit of predictability and some upside. And the way it works is that it uses a base access component with a value scaling component. And so that base access component is typically some sort of platform access fee or subscription fee on some periodic basis. Maybe it's on a month, done annually or quarterly or something like that. Then there's the value scaling component. This is your growth driver. This allows you to earn more when your customer creates more value with your product. Okay. So there are 3 key models, I would say, for selecting a growth driver, this value scaling component. So the first is around seats. So if the primary value your customers get is when they add more people on your product, then a seat-based model might actually be the right way to go, as long as the guardrails are right. If the primary value comes from the activity that a customer is running through your system, then a usage-based model might be something to consider. And if the primary value is actually from an outcome that your product delivers, let's say it might be like a closed customer ticket, right? Or inbound voice call completely handled by a voice AI, right? For those kinds of things, an outcome-based model might be the best way to do it. For most AI products, this hybrid model really does strike the perfect kind of balance. And so, Everett, yeah, once again, I'd love for you to talk a little bit about how, again, the pricing has that growth, or excuse me, the base component and the growth component.
Yeah, that's right. So we have to protect ourselves at both the low end and the high end. So at the low end, we need people to commit to a certain amount of spend with us, basically. It can be monthly, etc. But in order for us to for it to make it worth it for us to sort of deliver credits to them and make our economics work. So that's where there's a couple dimensions in the pricing model which have restrictions. So for example, you can't use CRM functionality on like our lowest plan. You have to kind of upgrade to get that. You can't use Gone on our lowest plan. You have to upgrade to get that. And I think it works well because customers we're sort of aligning where customers' other spend is going on those plans with where our model is. So for example, a company that's already bought Salesforce and Gone has already probably allocated, at least $50,000 to go-to-market tooling, which means adding on another 10 or $20,000 from Clay is kind of like within reason for them. Meanwhile, a company that is just working out of a spreadsheet and maybe has like two sales reps and is not even recording meetings, they're not a customer that we just want to start buying credits from us because they're probably not big enough or sophisticated enough to use them well. They're going to create a lot of support overhead, etc. So that's the sort of role of the base part in Clay. On the value scaling side, we sort of have a middle ground where we allow credits to scale up into the tens of millions of credits. But there are companies at the high end of that which are actually just going to use like all of the data and buy all of the data. And so for them, we actually provide more of like a flat file option where they can turn some of their consumption-based costs into like a fixed cost option. And so that's how we sort of like level off the scaling curve on purchasing credits because, if you're a Verizon, for example, and you're buying credits from Clay, y- you know, the initial amount of credits that you would buy if you just took the self-serve pricing model and scaled it, and the amount of cost you would have is sort of like prohibitive. And so on both the aligning the tiers that Clay prices in with what other software the customer is using and what software we require them to use. And then on the high volume side of kind of saying, okay, at a certain point with consumption pricing, you know, you need to kind of bend the curve down a little bit because enterprise budgets aren't unlimited. And both of those dimensions we kind of like play with other things besides just consumption in order to kind of align our pricing with where customers are at.
That's fantastic. I especially like the feature of creating that leveling off. Everett, it sounds like that's something I would like to learn a little bit more about myself. So I find that super intriguing. So David, you asked about smooth scaling. For example, charging for a single operation versus tiered volume plans for the value scaling. I think Everett covered that a little bit here. If you look at their value scaling, they actually do offer that in some of these tiered areas. You can come off mute if you have if you want to add a more little specificity to that, and we can spend another minute on here. We've got one more section to go.
Okay, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
If you do the tiered plans, in Clay's case, it's easy because people have credits and the credits are gone and they can't do anything else unless they get more credits. But suppose you have like a tiered volume plan where the customer has up to like 100,000 operations per month, and they're freely using the thing, right? They are not kind of nickel and diming, and they see that a given month it seems like they're gonna spend 120,000 operations. How should we handle that in terms of
Yeah.
forecasting and having them upgrade and not having bad surprise and not being able to do stuff?
Yeah, fantastic question. We provide protection for customers in two ways within our model. So first of all, we do allow them to buy what we call top-ups, which are one-time credit purchases that they can make at any point in order to support, a bulk enrichment project, to scale up a campaign, to do some one-off list building task. In go-to-market, a popular seasonal task is territory carve. So every year you'll divvy up your entire market amongst your sales team, create new books of business. Very data intensive thing, but it only occurs once a year. And so a customer might decide to allocate, 500,000 credits to a territory carve outside of their projected usage. And so we allow for that. And we also, that element of our pricing is reflective of our origins as a kind of creative outbound tool. Because if you discover a campaign that is working, then you don't want to waste any time before you scale that up and apply more credits to it. On the flip side, we also allow for rollover. So if a customer can roll over some percentage of their unused credits into kind of the next year, and of course, they need to purchase the next year at the same or like a greater amount. That's like a key actually protection that you want to have with rollover. But if a customer, let's say they buy 1 million credits, they only use 850,000 of them, then in our default contracts, we will allow them to roll over up to 15% of their total amount, so they can take that unused 150K and use it for the next year. So in both if the customer is underestimating or overestimating where their credit amounts are, we allow them. There's some features of our contracts that allow them to kind of handle that. But then you'll notice, like in both cases, um, on the rollover side, you have to buy a second year. Like you can't just cancel your contract and roll over. And then on the top up side, we do also put a cap on that. So we don't allow customers to just buy like 5 times more credits than they originally purchased via top ups. We put a cap on that. And that's also for the customer's own good, because in many cases, if you need that many more credits, then you should just recontract to get a better credit rate. So these are all like details on consumption pricing that are really important to keep in mind. And you can kind of like find your way there, but generally you'll find things like this built into a lot of credit models in the details.
That's phenomenal. Thank you, Everett. Okay, let's move on. Rule number 3. So this is all about those guardrails. And actually, Everett is a great lead-in, because you were literally talking about some of the guardrails you have, and they protect you as a vendor, but also the customer, and neither of them are really standing in the way of that customer creating the value, right? That's the tension. And so part of what we look at, right, if you start to look at like this graph here, as you start to increase your usage, maybe you're increasing your revenue, but your costs could start to get a little bit out of whack, right? And part of the issue is that with AI usage patterns and costs, it can actually create that huge risk that a traditional SaaS product doesn't face, right? Ability to eat into your margins. That's, this here, your revenue's here, but your costs are way, way higher. And so guardrails are really about these mechanisms that are protecting you and your customers from the volatility. And the key is that you have to implement these as a protection without limiting the value creation. It's basically a safety net. And so, yep, go ahead. Oh, was there a question? Oh, no. Okay. So this is where things get a little bit tricky, right? Your customers have essentially 3 non-negotiable needs that you have to be able to address. First, they want pricing that is fairer in terms of the value they feel they are receiving, right? Next, they want the predictability. Again, this goes perfectly with what Everett was talking about, allowing those customers to not worry about if they're going to be over or under. And third, by doing that, protect them from bill shock, right? They just simply cannot have that happen. They have to have predictability in their business. And so again, the best companies are providing these guardrails, right? They're thoughtful guardrails that help balance across all of these competing needs, okay? It lets their customer grow and protect them from unnecessary risk. These guardrails wind up creating very much win-win economics, right? And if you do it well, they actually are giving you a signal, right? They're a trigger that maybe there's an upsell, right? So for example, if you've got a customer that's topping up all the time, then maybe that's a signal they need to move into the higher tier, right? So I love this approach. And I think, what I'd love to do is share some of the things that I offer to companies when I'm advising them. And, it's kind of one of those things where you've done all this hard work, right? But you start to wonder, is it going to work in the market? And so Everett and I reviewed this actually before our summit before. And part of it is I've over the years designed this 8-point checklist that you can use to kind of vet your pricing. And the way it works is this. So if you think of it, take the 8 and we're going to separate it into initial market and then scaling. So on the initial market side, is it aligned with value, right? Does the customer see it as fair for how they create value with your product? Is it acceptable? Is it something that they can understand? Is it consumable? Do they know how to incorporate the, or budget for your product? And again, the predictability. Now, as you start to enjoy some of that initial market entry and you're starting to grow as a business, there are a few other key points on the checklist that really need to get addressed. So number one, are you scaling in a profitable way? And again, not stepping in the way of your customers, creating that value. Can it be audited? Can you produce a report of the customer's usage that aligns with their understanding? It's sort of like when you get your mobile phone bill. If you have a cost overrun, you can look in the bill to understand. It's auditable, right? Every single call, every overage, data overages, whatever, they're all in there. Is it sustainable? Can you provide this pricing model across the different markets that you're going to be entering into? Can it withstand maybe some of the market forces that are there? That's a little bit harder, but at the end of the day, you have to be able to flex with the market, and importantly, keep it differentiated. One of the things I think has been a testament to Clay's success is their ability to not only innovate on the dimension of the product, but how they offer it in terms of their pricing and packaging, right? This has allowed them to become the uncontested leader in this space right now. And so we have to be thinking broadly, not just innovating on our own product and product dimension, but really thinking about how can we innovate in terms of bringing value to the customer and monetizing that. And so if we just kind of bring it all together, right? So number one, we've got to figure out what our customers truly value, and you've got to come up with a pricing metric that aligns with this, right? This is your foundation. You've got to get this right first. Then you need to match your pricing model to how you deliver that value, right? Make sure that your revenue is growing as your customers are enjoying more success. Like we talked about, hybrid pricing models can give you a good balance of predictability and upside. And then 3, including and thinking very thoughtfully about these guardrails to help you protect your margins. Don't limit value creation for the customer. Have safety mechanisms that are also triggers for you to know when your customers are growing and offer them ways to get more value from your product and for you to make more money. I'll tell you, I promise you, if you start with these 3 rules and use some of the questions that we've put out to you today just to get started, you're going to be ahead of many, many others that are in the field, right? And you're going to be able to set the foundation for some sustainable growth. And I'll leave you with this, right? When you look a little bit more closely, the problem you solve shapes your pricing strategy. And in a way, how you price, like the pricing strategy you want to implement is actually your product strategy. You have to build a product that supports it, and you still have to fit it to the buyer. Okay. And so if you start talking to your customers, you might have the most innovative, creative monetization and pricing model in the world, but you still need to make sure it matches those 8 points in the checkpoint, the checklist, so that your buyer is still going to be able to acquire it, right? So start with the problem that you're going to solve, not with the model, and then work back with there. And with that, I just wanted to say thank you. There's actually a little bit of a cheat sheet It's actually been posted on LinkedIn also, but you can use this QR code to download the PDF from Scale's website as well. And that's it. I know we did kind of a lot in this hour, but we do have a few minutes for questions. If there's any questions, we'll kind of open up the mic. Or questions in the chat. Not that I see. Okay. All right. Going once. If you're on mute talking, take yourself off mute, like I had my problem. All right. Well, here's some contact info. Thanks again, Everett. I really appreciate you joining a second time.
Great to talk to you all.
And thank you, everybody. And with that, we'll talk real soon. Again, this is recorded, and I know that we'll get this out to you pretty soon. Usually
Thanks all.
within days.
Thank you, Pete. Really appreciate your time. And thanks for
Yeah.
sharing the contact information as well.
Yeah, thank you. All right.
Thank you. Bye-bye.